The wind howled across the barren plains of Wyoming Territory, 1887. Carrying with it the promise of an early winter, Thomas Garrett pulled his worn coat tighter around his shoulders as he surveyed his modest ranch from atop the hill. At 24, he owned 300 acres of stubborn land that fought him at every turn, much like everything else in this unforgiving country. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in the shades of amber and crimson. Thomas's cattle huddled together near the creek, their breath forming small clouds in the cooling air. He counted them again. 43 head, same as this morning. It wasn't much, but it was his. Built from nothing but sweat and determination after his parents died of fever 5 years back. He'd inherited more than land from them. He'd inherited their caution, their distrust of the world beyond their fence posts. His father had been a stern man who believed in keeping to oneself, and his mother, though gentler, had reinforced the lesson that attachments brought nothing but grief. "Keep your heart locked up tight, Tommy," she'd whispered on her deathbed. "This world ain't kind to those who feel too much." Thomas had taken those words to heart. In 5 years of running the ranch, he'd barely spoken to anyone beyond what business required. The other ranchers thought him odd, a young man who didn't drink at the saloon, didn't court the daughters at church socials, didn't even keep company with the working girls when he rode into town for supplies. They whispered about him, called him the hermit behind his back, but Thomas didn't mind. Loneliness was a small price for peace. The afternoon had started clear, but now dark clouds rolled in from the north, moving with unnatural speed. Thomas frowned, recognizing the signs. These weren't ordinary storm clouds. They carried the weight of a blizzard. He'd seen it before, the way the air grew still and heavy. How the birds disappeared. How even the wind seemed to hold its breath before unleashing hell. He spurred his horse, a steady mare named Belle, toward the herd. If he could get them into the eastern valley, they'd have some protection from the worst of it. But as he rode, the temperature plummeted so fast his breath froze in his beard. The first snowflakes fell large and wet, then smaller and harder, driven horizontal by a wind that seemed to come from all directions at once. Within minutes, he couldn't see Belle's ears in front of him. The world became a white wall of fury. He'd miscalculated badly. This wasn't just an early storm. This was a killer blizzard, the kind that left cattle frozen standing and men lost 50 feet from their own barn doors. Thomas knew he had to find shelter. The ranch house was at least 3 miles back. Impossible in this weather. Belle stumbled, nearly throwing him, and he realized with growing dread that he'd lost all sense of direction. In the white blindness, every direction looked the same. He gave Belle her head, trusting her instincts more than his own. The mare pushed forward, head low, fighting through drifts that seemed to appear from nowhere. Thomas's hands went numb inside his gloves. Ice formed on his eyelashes, making it hard to keep his eyes open. Just when he thought they were done for, Belle stopped so suddenly he nearly flew over her neck. Through the swirling snow, he caught a glimpse of something. A flicker of orange light. Fire. His frozen mind took a moment to process it. Fire meant people. People meant shelter. He slid off Belle, keeping one hand on her rez, and stumbled toward the light. It came from a small structure tucked against a rocky outcrop, barely visible even 20 feet away. A teepee, he realized with surprise. The conical shape was unmistakable, though he had never seen one this far from the reservation. Thomas hesitated. Indians. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Can't trust him, son. They smile at your face and put a knife in your back. But the cold was a knife already. Cutting through his coat, his skin, into his very bones. Pride and prejudice were luxuries he couldn't afford. He approached the entrance. A flap of hide that glowed from the fire within. His frozen fingers fumbled as he knocked on the wooden pole beside it. A courtesy his mother had taught him. Always announce yourself, she'd said. Manners matter, even at the edge of the world. Hello. His voice came out as a croak. I'm sorry to bother. I'm caught in the storm. The flap pulled aside, and Thomas found himself looking into dark eyes that held both weariness and surprise. A young woman stood there, perhaps 20 years old, with long black hair braided down her back. Behind her, another woman, slightly older, rose from beside the fire. Both wore traditional dress, soft duog skin decorated with beadwork that caught the firelight. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Thomas knew what they saw. A white man armed at their door. He could see their tension, the way the older one's hand moved to something at her belt, a knife. Probably. He couldn't blame them. The treaties meant nothing out here. White men had given them plenty of reasons for distrust. "Please," he said, his teeth chattering so hard he could barely speak. "My horse, we're lost. I mean no harm." The younger woman looked back at her companion, her sister. Thomas guessed, seeing the resemblance, they exchanged words in their own language. Quick and low. Then the older one nodded slightly. "Come," the younger woman said in accented English, "bring horse." Thomas nearly wept with relief. He tugged Belle forward, and the women showed him where to tie her on the lee side of the teepee, somewhat protected from the worst of the wind. His fingers were too numb to work the knots. And without a word, the older sister took over, her hands quick and efficient inside the teepee. The warmth hit him like a physical blow. A small fire burned in the center. Smoke rising through the opening at the peak. Buffalo robes and blankets created a cozy circle around the flames. The space smelled of smoke, leather, and something else. Herbs maybe, or tea brewing in a pot near the coals. Thomas stood awkwardly near the entrance, dripping melting snow. Unsure of the protocol, the younger woman gestured to a spot near the fire. "Sit you free standing there." He collapsed more than sat, his legs suddenly unable to hold him. The older sister studied him with intelligent eyes, then said something to her sister, who nodded and began preparing something in a small clay pot. I'm Thomas Garrett." He managed. "I have a ranch about 3 miles south. Or at least I think it's south. Hard to tell in the storm." "I am Mary," the younger woman said, surprising him with a Christian name. "This my sister Sarah." Mary. Sarah. Not the names he'd expected. He must have shown his surprise because Mary smiled slightly. "Mission school?" She explained. "They give us new names. Say our real names too hard for white tongues." There was no bitterness in her voice, just matter-of-fact acceptance. Sarah handed him a cup of something hot. The ceramic burned his frozen fingers, but he held on, letting the heat seep into his bones. The first sip made him cough. It was strong, bitter, with an aftertaste of pine and something earthy. "Medicine tea," Mary said. "Warm you inside." As feeling returned to his extremities, pain came with it. His fingers and toes burned as if held to hot coals. He must have shown it on his face because Sarah spoke for the first time. "Pain is good. Means no frostbite. Drink more." They moved around him with quiet efficiency, hanging his wet coat near the fire, offering him a blanket for his shoulders. Their kindness confused him. Everything he'd been taught said Indians were savage, cruel, not to be trusted. But here were 2 young women sharing their shelter, their medicine, their warmth, with a stranger who represented everything that had been taken from their people. "Why?" he asked suddenly. "Why help me?" He gestured vaguely at himself, unable to finish. Mary and Sarah exchanged glances again. Then Mary sat across from him. Her face serious in the firelight. "Storm does not care if you're white or Apache. Cold kills all same. We know what it means to need shelter." The wind rattled the tippy walls, but inside the fire crackled peacefully. Thomas found himself relaxing for the first time and he couldn't remember how long. The tea was working its magic. Warmth spreading from his belly outward. "You live here?" he asked. Then immediately felt foolish. Obviously, they lived here. "For now," Sarah said, "we move with seasons. Winter come early this year." "Are you alone?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. 2 women alone on the frontier seemed dangerous. Regardless of race, Mary's expression hardened slightly. Our men are gone. Soldiers take them to reservation. She paused, choosing words carefully. We choose different path. Thomas understood. They were fugitives in a way. Living free but illegal. Hiding from the authorities who had forced them onto the reservation. He should report them. It was the law. But looking at their faces in the firelight, seeing the dignity they maintained despite everything, he knew he wouldn't. The storm raged on outside. But inside the teepee, an unexpected peace descended.